For 40 years, a single photograph sat in an evidence box. Overlooked, dismissed, forgotten. But in 2023, a detective with fresh eyes noticed something in the background of that photo. Something so small, so seemingly insignificant that everyone before her had missed it. That tiny detail would crack open a case that had haunted a small town for 4 decades. It would bring justice to a family that had almost given up hope. And it would prove that sometimes the answer has been there all along. You just need to know where to look. This is the story of the Miller Creek murder, a case that baffled investigators, tore apart a community, and went cold for 40 years. Until one overlooked clue changed everything. I'm bringing you deep into the vault on this one. We're talking original case files, court documents, interviews with investigators, and the shocking twist that no one saw coming. Welcome to the vault. Let's unlock this mystery. October 15, 1983. Miller Creek, Washington. Population 3,200. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, where people didn't lock their doors, where the biggest crime was usually teenagers spray painting the water tower. That all changed on a Friday morning when retired postal worker George Henderson took his dog for their usual walk along the Miller Creek Trail. His German Shepherd, Duke, started barking frantically near a dense patch of evergreens about 50 yards from the main path. George called him back, but Duke wouldn't budge. He just kept barking and barking. George pushed through the underbrush to see what had Duke so worked up. What he found would haunt him for the rest of his life. Partially concealed by fallen branches and leaves was the body of a young woman. She was lying face down, wearing jeans and a yellow rain jacket. One of her shoes was missing. George stumbled backward, his heart pounding. He ran to the nearest house, the Kowalski residence, and pounded on the door. "Call the police," he gasped. There's a body in the woods." Within 20 minutes, Miller Creek's small police department had the area cordoned off. Chief Deputy Frank Morrison arrived at the scene and immediately recognized the yellow jacket. 22-year-old Jennifer Hayes had been reported missing 3 days earlier by her roommate, Lisa Chen. Jennifer had left their apartment Tuesday evening around 7 p.m., saying she was meeting someone. She never came home. Now she was dead. The medical examiner would later determine that Jennifer had been strangled. Time of death, approximately 72 hours before discovery, which matched the timeline of her disappearance. But here's what made this case particularly disturbing. Jennifer's body had been carefully arranged. Her hands were folded across her chest, her missing shoe was placed neatly beside her. Leaves had been deliberately scattered over her, not just fallen naturally. Whoever killed Jennifer Hayes hadn't just murdered her, they'd posed her. Like she was sleeping, like they cared about her. It was a detail that would perplex investigators for decades. Jennifer Marie Hayes was born in Miller Creek on April 3, 1961. She was the youngest of 3 children born to Robert and Patricia Hayes. By all accounts, Jennifer was bright, ambitious, and well-loved. She graduated from Miller Creek High School in 1979, where she'd been editor of the school newspaper and captain of the debate team. She'd spent 2 years at Seattle Community College studying journalism before returning to Miller Creek in 1981. She took a job at the Miller Creek Chronicle, the town's weekly newspaper, where she wrote local interest stories and covered town council meetings. Her editor, Margaret Sullivan, described her as hungry for the big story. Jennifer always wanted to dig deeper, ask the hard questions. She wasn't content with surface-level reporting. Jennifer lived in a small apartment above the hardware store on Main Street with her roommate and best friend since high school, Lisa Chen. The 2 young women were inseparable. Lisa told investigators that Jennifer had been excited about something in the weeks before her death. She'd been staying late at the newspaper office, making phone calls, taking notes. When Lisa asked what she was working on, Jennifer had been evasive. She said it was probably nothing, but if it turned into something, it could be big, Lisa recalled through tears. I asked if it was dangerous. She laughed and said, "This is Miller Creek. What's the worst that could happen?" Those words would echo through the investigation for years. Jennifer's parents, Robert and Patricia, were devastated. Their youngest daughter, their firecracker as Robert called her, was gone. Taken violently from a town that was supposed to be safe, the Hayes family would spend the next 40 years demanding answers, demanding justice, refusing to let Jennifer become just another forgotten victim. The Miller Creek Police Department had never handled a murder investigation. Chief Morrison immediately called in help from the Washington State Police. Detective Raymond Cole, a 20-year veteran of homicide investigations, took the lead. His first step, victimology, understanding who Jennifer was, her relationships, her routine, any potential enemies or threats. What he found was a young woman with no apparent enemies, no jealous ex-boyfriends, no financial troubles, no known conflicts. Jennifer Hayes was, by every account, well-liked and living a quiet life in a quiet town. But there were three key pieces of evidence that Detective Cole focused on. First, the missing appointment. Jennifer had told her roommate she was meeting someone the night she disappeared. But she hadn't said who. Lisa had assumed it was work-related, but Jennifer's editor had no knowledge of any such meeting. Jennifer's desk calendar at work had been checked. Tuesday, October 12th, 7 p.m., completely blank. If she'd written down the appointment, she'd erased it. Second, the phone records investigators subpoenaed phone records for Jennifer's apartment and the newspaper office. In the week before her death, Jennifer had made multiple calls to a number registered to a payphone outside a gas station 30 miles away in Clearwater. Why would a small-town reporter be calling a payphone in another town? Who was she trying to reach? The gas station attendant couldn't remember anyone suspicious, and without cell phone technology, tracking who might have received those calls was nearly impossible. Third, the photograph among Jennifer's possessions was an undeveloped roll of film found in her camera. When developed, most photos were mundane, town events, friends, scenery. But one photo stood out. It showed the exterior of a warehouse in what appeared to be an industrial area. Not in Miller Creek, investigators didn't recognize the location. The photo was slightly blurry, taken from inside a car through a windshield. Why had Jennifer photographed this warehouse? What was she investigating? Detective Cole circulated the photo to neighboring police departments. No one recognized it. The case file noted, "Unknown significance, possible dead end." That photograph would sit in the evidence box for 40 years. Unknown significance. Possible dead end. They had no idea how wrong they were. In any murder investigation, everyone's a suspect until they're not. Detective Cole started close to home. Suspect number 1, David Pritchard. David was Jennifer's ex-boyfriend from high school. They dated for 2 years before Jennifer left for Seattle. The breakup had reportedly been amicable, but David had never married, never moved on. Some townspeople whispered that he'd never gotten over Jennifer, that he'd been hoping she'd come back to Miller Creek for him. When questioned, David admitted he still had feelings for Jennifer. He said he'd seen her around town occasionally and they'd been friendly, but nothing more. His alibi for the night of October 12th. He was home alone. No one could verify it. David became the primary suspect. The police searched his property, seized his vehicle, tested his clothes for evidence. Nothing. No physical evidence linking him to the crime scene. No witnesses placing him with Jennifer that night. David Pritchard was eventually cleared, but the suspicion followed him for years. He left Miller Creek in 1985 and never returned. Suspect number 2, Thomas Brennan Thomas, was a drifter who'd been seen around Miller Creek in the weeks before Jennifer's murder. He had a criminal record. Petty theft, assault charges from years earlier. Someone matching his description had been seen near the trail where Jennifer's body was found just days before the murder. Police tracked Thomas to Oregon, where he was arrested on an unrelated charge. He denied ever being in Miller Creek. His fingerprints didn't match any found at the scene. Without physical evidence, he couldn't be charged. Suspect number 3, someone from Jennifer's investigation. This was the theory Detective Cole kept coming back to. Jennifer had been working on something, making mysterious phone calls, photographing warehouses in unknown locations. What if she'd stumbled onto something dangerous? What if someone silenced her to protect a secret? But without knowing what she was investigating, this theory hit a wall. Jennifer's notes from work revealed nothing unusual. Her editor knew of no controversial stories in development. The trail went cold. By 1985, 2 years after Jennifer's murder, the investigation had stalled. No new leads, no new evidence, no arrests. The case was officially classified as cold. Jennifer's parents never gave up hope, but as the years turned into decades, even they began to lose faith that justice would ever come. 40 years is a long time. Detective Raymond Cole retired in 1998, having never solved the case that haunted him most. He told a reporter in 2005, "Not a week goes by that I don't think about Jennifer Hayes. She deserved better than what we gave her." Chief Morrison passed away in 2010, taking whatever insights he might have had to his grave. Jennifer's father, Robert, died in 2016 without seeing justice for his daughter. Patricia Hayes, now in her 80s, still kept Jennifer's room exactly as it had been in 1983. Photos on the wall, clothes in the closet, a shrine to a daughter stolen too soon. Lisa Chen, Jennifer's roommate and best friend, became a victims' rights advocate. She never forgot the promise she made at Jennifer's funeral. "I won't let them forget you." Every year on the anniversary of Jennifer's death, Lisa would call the Miller Creek Police Department and ask the same question. "Any updates on Jennifer Hayes?" For 39 years, the answer was always the same. "No, ma'am, I'm sorry." The evidence boxes gathered dust. The case files were digitized and stored in a database that few people accessed. Jennifer Hayes became a footnote, a cold case statistic, a tragedy from another era. Miller Creek moved on. The town grew. New people moved in who'd never heard of Jennifer Hayes. The Miller Creek Chronicle was bought by a regional newspaper chain. The apartment above the hardware store where Jennifer lived was renovated and rented to college students who had no idea of its history. Time, as it always does, moved forward. But here's the thing about cold cases: they're never truly closed. They're just waiting. Waiting for technology to catch up. Waiting for someone to talk. Waiting for a fresh pair of eyes to see what everyone else missed. Jennifer Hayes was waiting. Detective Sarah Chen, no relation to Lisa, joined the Miller Creek Police Department in 2019. By 2022, she'd been promoted to lead detective. One of her first initiatives was to review all unsolved cases using modern technology. DNA analysis had advanced dramatically since 1983. Digital databases could cross-reference evidence in ways that were impossible 40 years ago. The Jennifer Hayes case was near the top of her list. In March 2023, Detective Chen requested all physical evidence from storage. Boxes that hadn't been opened in decades arrived at the station. She started with the basics, re-examining the crime scene photos, reading through witness statements, reviewing the autopsy report. Then she got to the photograph, the one of the unidentified warehouse. The case note said unknown significance, but something about it bothered Chen. Why would Jennifer Hayes photograph a random warehouse? Investigative journalists don't take random photos. Everything means something. Chen decided to use modern technology that hadn't existed in 1983. She uploaded the photograph to Google's reverse image search and several geographic databases. Nothing. But Chen noticed something. In the background of the photo, partially obscured by the warehouse, was a street sign. The photo was too blurry to read in 1983, but with modern image enhancement software. Chen sent the photo to the state crime lab with a request, "Can you clear up this street sign?" 2 weeks later, the enhanced image came back. The sign read, "Riverside Industrial Park." Chen's heart rate picked up. She searched for Riverside Industrial Park, Washington. One result, Clearwater, Washington, 30 miles from Miller Creek, the same town where Jennifer had been making repeated phone calls to a payphone. This wasn't a coincidence. Chen drove to Clearwater and located Riverside Industrial Park. Most of the warehouses from 1983 were gone, replaced by modern buildings. But the street layout was the same. She pulled out the 1983 photograph and oriented herself. The warehouse would have been right here, where a new office building now stood. Chen went to the Clearwater City Planning Office and requested historical records. Who owned that warehouse in 1983? The record showed the warehouse had been owned by a company called Northwest Logistics, Inc. The company had dissolved in 1987, 4 years after Jennifer's murder. Chen dug deeper. Who had operated Northwest Logistics? Corporate filings from 1983 listed 3 principals: Marcus Redmond, James Keller, Paul Sutton. Chen ran background checks on all 3 names. Marcus Redmond, deceased, 1992. James Keller, deceased, 2008. Paul Sutton, alive. Age 68, currently living in Spokane, Washington. Chen's hands trembled as she typed Paul Sutton's name into the criminal database. Multiple arrests in the 1980s, drug trafficking, assault. Charges filed in 1984 but dismissed due to lack of evidence. 1 year after Jennifer Hayes was murdered. Chen had found her lead, but she needed more than circumstantial evidence. She needed DNA. She needed proof. That's when she remembered. The evidence from Jennifer's body had been preserved. In 1983, they'd collected DNA samples but didn't have the technology to properly analyze them. In 2023, they did. Chen submitted the DNA evidence for testing. She requested a warrant for a DNA sample from Paul Sutton. The judge approved it. On August 15, 2023, almost exactly 40 years after Jennifer Hayes was murdered, Paul Sutton was arrested at his home in Spokane. The DNA evidence was a match. Paul Sutton had killed Jennifer Hayes. But why? What was the motive? In interrogation, faced with irrefutable DNA evidence, Sutton finally talked. In 1983, Northwest Logistics wasn't just a shipping company. It was a front for a drug trafficking operation. Marijuana and cocaine were being moved through that warehouse, distributed across Washington and Oregon. Jennifer Hayes, ambitious young journalist, had gotten a tip about the operation. She'd been investigating for weeks, making phone calls, asking questions, taking photos. She'd contacted Paul Sutton, claiming she wanted to interview him about business operations in Clearwater. He'd agreed to meet her, thinking he could feel out how much she knew. They met on October 12, 1983, at 7 p.m. Not in Clearwater, too risky. In Miller Creek, on a quiet trail where they wouldn't be seen. Jennifer confronted him with what she knew. She had evidence. She was going to publish her story. Paul Sutton made a choice that night. He killed her to protect his operation. He staged her body, he claimed, because she reminded me of my daughter. I didn't want her to look. I don't know. It was wrong. All of it was wrong. Paul Sutton was charged with first-degree murder. In November 2023, he pleaded guilty to avoid trial. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After 40 years, Jennifer Hayes finally got justice. Patricia Hayes, now 87 years old, sat in the courtroom as Paul Sutton was sentenced. Tears streamed down her face, not just grief for her daughter, but relief that finally, she had answers. Lisa Chen was there too. She kept the promise she made 40 years ago. She never let anyone forget Jennifer. Detective Sarah Chen received a commendation for her work on the case, but she says the real credit goes to Jennifer herself. She left us the clue, Chen said in an interview. That photograph, she was a journalist. She documented everything. She knew it was dangerous, and she left us breadcrumbs. It just took us 40 years to see them. The case of Jennifer Hayes reminds us that justice delayed is not justice denied, that cold cases aren't closed cases, that someone, somewhere is always still looking, and that sometimes the answer has been there all along. You just need the right person, at the right time, with the right tools to finally see it. Jennifer Hayes' story is now closed, but her legacy lives on. In the victim's advocacy work, Lisa Chen continues. In the cold case investigations that Detective Sarah Chen pursues, and in the reminder that truth, no matter how buried, has a way of coming to light. This has been The Vault. where hidden stories come to light. If you have information about any unsolved case, please contact your local authorities. Your tip could be the one that finally brings justice. Rest in peace. Jennifer Hayes, 1961–1983. Gone but never forgotten.